My current research is investigating tropical deforestation and its ecosystem impacts. So that includes things like trying to work out where deforestation is going to happen, why it's going to happen in those locations, and then working out what that does. So which species might be impacted, which species might benefit, which are going to lose out, how many species might go extinct, thinking about what it means for the carbon cycle, for the water cycle, and for the functioning of the forest as a whole. So most of my research is based at a project called the SAFE project. It's located in Malaysian Borneo, and we're working with an oil palm company who is clearing an area of logged forest and converting it to plantation. So we set up an experiment in collaboration with them, which allowed us to design that landscape so we can control that deforestation. So we've set up a very detailed monitoring system at the SAFE project where we're tracking changes in the abundance of thousands of species. We know exactly which species were there before this conversion began, so we can watch which ones drop out and try to understand why it is they drop out. We can see changes in how carbon is cycling, how nutrients are cycling through that ecosystem, how water is moving through that ecosystem. We can track all of these changes almost in real time as the conversion happens, which gives us a lot of detailed insight into what's happening. The goal is to get a cohesive understanding of how a tropical forest system operates in its entirety. So that's not just thinking about which species are there, that would just be monitoring and quantifying the ecosystem. We want to know how it works. So how do all those species interact? How do nutrients cycle through that system? So what's going on with nitrogen, what's going on with carbon and phosphorus, for example. These forest systems have a water cycle, and all of these cycles and processes are happening at the same time in the same place. We're trying to understand how those different cycles and processes interact with each other so we can understand the forest as a whole. Getting this sort of knowledge allows us to approach a number of environmental problems. So we know across the tropics more than a third, almost a half of all standing forests have been logged. Getting those forests to recover is a really important issue. There's more than 1 billion livelihoods around the world tied up with tropical forests. And if they're degraded to the point where you can't extract more timber, for example, you lose the value. So trying to find ways in which we can restore and regenerate these forests so that they can recover that commercial potential is a particularly important challenge which we're tackling. So what we're learning can help us design landscapes so that we can have agricultural production, so oil palm for example, but do that while minimizing the environmental and the ecological cost. So we're understanding things like how wide a piece of forest should be alongside a stream to protect the water quality, prevent erosion feeding sediment into that stream, how wide those strips need to be so they can act as conduits for animals to cross landscapes. We can understand how big a piece of forest needs to be to protect the species which are within it and to act as a carbon sink rather than losing that carbon to the atmosphere over time. So all these things let us design landscapes, these agricultural landscapes. We can come up with design ideas so that we can minimize the environmental damage that converting them to a plantation does. My research is based primarily in Malaysian Borneo in the state of Sabah. The project itself is very international, it's highly collaborative. We've had, in the last 7 years, more than 350 researchers coming from 15 different nations, 65 institutions. So my research covers a lot of different disciplines. So it has biodiversity and biodiversity interests at its core, but it cuts into conservation biology, it cuts into agricultural economics, plantation management. We work with engineers to develop new types of equipment for monitoring ecosystems, so acoustic systems which monitor continuously. We use drones to monitor the phenology of the forest, so trying to work out when trees are flowering, when they're making new leaves. We work with vector biologists to try and understand disease dynamics in these landscapes, so how many species of mosquito are out there, how many of those mosquitoes are there, and what their role is in transmitting disease across these plantation landscapes. It's easy to get involved with us. The SAFE project is run as an open field system, so we take students from many universities, not just at Imperial College London, But students from anywhere in the world are quite welcome to come along and work at the system. So it all operated through our website. All you have to do is tell us what you want to do. We send that out to people who are already working at the site just to check that there's no one doing exactly the same thing, and provided there's not, we're quite open to anyone coming in to do whatever it is they want to contribute to understand the system better.